Muammar Gaddafi. My contact with Gaddafi was different and quite unique. I first met the Libyan leader on a mission to Tripoli for Torrijos in the mid-1970s. It was part of Omar's plan to reach out to the Third World and establish Panama as an independent country among other nations. The idea was to establish contact, set up lines of common interest, and arrange for a later visit by Torrijos himself. I was accompanied on that first trip by several members of the National Guard, including Colonel Armando Contreras, Lieutenant Colonel Armando Bellido, and Major Cleto Hernandez, who was an especially able aide-de-camp, speaking both French and Arabic. Gaddafi knew little about Panama, and it was my job to tell him what we were all about. I brought maps, gave him an atlas as a gift, and spent a day describing the strategic importance of the Panama Canal. He marveled at the thought of the canal and Panama's rivers and lakes. He swooned at the idea of so much fresh water, comparing Panama with his desert home. It was a learning curve for Gaddafi, but the more he heard, the more he expressed solidarity with us. I had long, very interesting conversations with him. With the different visits over the course of time, I had the chance to see him in several phases: his military phase and his Islamic phase. His identification with the religious system took him back to his roots, and he set himself up in a tent in the desert. I also saw him at his house, the same one that was bombed by U.S. warplanes when Reagan attacked Libya. His wife and children were in the house, and an infant child was killed. The United States didn't express regret and said that the child wasn't his, but only an adopted baby. I had the opportunity to know him as a political leader, supporter of third world countries, and as a military man. I was there when he issued his credo, the Green Book, during the country's annual liberation celebration. The event included a great military parade, and they displayed their entire arsenal. I was on the reviewing stand as Gaddafi's special guest. In this incarnation, I saw Gaddafi, the military commander, leading his people, motivating them. At the time, he was in the middle of a border conflict with Egypt and was defying their army. His philosophy was to put his ideals into action. Libya set out to help liberation movements around the world. He had a ministry dedicated to doing this, and that operational aspect was important to us. Our goal was to create sympathy for Panama's position and support for passage of the canal treaties internationally. That's why we approached Gaddafi and other leaders of non-aligned countries. He understood our mission. He was an intelligent, well-mannered person in the sense that he knew how to listen, ask informed questions, and respond. Those are, after all, hallmarks of an educated person, and I recognize these qualities in both Gaddafi and Castro. To know how to listen, to know how to explain oneself, to ask a question, and to have the patience to hear the answer. After several visits, we finally arranged for Torrijos to visit Libya. Gaddafi received him at his office. We went on a tour of the country. He took us to an oil processing facility, to the university, to the land reform projects, and to a desert station where they were at the time planting wheat by using an irrigation system. It was a successful visit, capped off by the signing of cultural treaties. In all, I made 10 trips to Libya and was always received by Gaddafi in an atmosphere of sympathy and respect. I maintained contact with him after the death of Torrijos. It was not, as the Americans would have it, some subterranean, mysterious contact, and it had nothing to do with espionage. These were political contacts, above board, a meeting between leaders, man to man. In times of crisis for either one, we called each other by phone. When the United States attacked him, I called to find out about the situation there. He was obviously very upset. He had lost a child. Throughout this association, I took Gaddafi as he was, the leader of a sovereign country under attack by the United States. When I was under political attack during the last months before the invasion, he called every week to express his support and concern. In September 1989, he invited me to attend the commemoration of the Libyan Revolution. My daughters Lorena and Thais represented me in Tripoli. In the course of time, Libya had broadened its diplomatic representation in Panama. They gave it some importance, adding a cultural office and building a small mosque downtown. They also had economic interests and were planning to develop operations in the Free Zone, where they had purchased commercial space. There was never any involvement in terrorist training. We made that clear to the Americans and the Israelis when they expressed concern. We said that our relations with countries like Libya showed our neutrality and our sovereign right to choose our friends and allies. We were developing open, above-board commercial relations with many countries. Our goal was to have Panama as an open trading center for the commercial benefit of all. If we had relations with these countries, it was unlikely that Panama would become a target for the terrorist activity of any one of them.